Hey everyone, welcome to GT Web Dev. Yeah, this is our second meeting of the semester, so congratulations for surviving and welcome. So on our Facebook page, which I'm sure most of you are subscribed to, we noted that Ellen is definitely coming to our club tomorrow, so be sure to show up. You have a non-zero chance of meeting her, even though there's a lot of zeros in that probability, but it's non-zero.
It's about 11.4% chance of meeting her.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to point out that we did post our video from last week's talk, Jackson's talk on how the internet works, and so you can check it out. And from every week we'll be posting a video so that you and your friends can catch up with whatever we've talked about. So today, what I want to talk about is how to create a website from scratch and get it online in no time flat. The only requirements are a web browser and a personal email account. So let's get started. So there's a service called GitHub. It's used to track version control your code, and what that means is that you upload your code to their website, and basically it gives you a history of how files have changed while you're developing coding related projects. It's used by, I would say, most developers that do any sort of work that's published in any sort of way. And it's the most popular way of making sure your code is available to other developers. Today we're going to be using GitHub for something that most of the officers here actually use for their own personal websites, which is getting free hosting for static content websites. So I'm going to get started with that. And before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about Apple Maps. So in September of 2012, Apple released a whole bunch of new software, including iOS 6 at the time, now we're at iOS 10, their iCloud services, and Apple Maps. A lot of developers within Apple thought it was very important to create their own mapping platform so they're not reliant on services like Google Maps or NavQuest or anything else. So when Apple released their service, they realized that we just made a huge mistake. They realized they made a huge mistake. They did not thoroughly vet their code, and the data aggregation portion of Maps, which is the entire concept of mapping, was completely done horribly. So that's what they realized, and it was a huge PR nightmare for them. People were stubbornly driving off cliffs and stuff like that because they were just staring at their phones. But beside that, Apple made a huge mistake and they paid a huge price with their public relations. So the moment something like that happens, a lot of heat goes down from the top of the company down to the developers. And the developers are forced to start rapidly fixing their mistakes. And so what Apple did to fix their mistakes was they developed a site called Maps Connect. Oops. They developed a service that allows people to correct mistakes on Apple Maps and add their own businesses to it. So if you just search Apple Maps, the second link we get is Apple Maps Connect. So this is the site. If I log in here, so you can log in with your Apple ID. You can start registering your business, just like how Google aggregates so much information on businesses. Apple wanted to get there too. And so when I saw this site, I wanted to know how does Apple create such good-looking websites, and how do they do it so fast after they had this huge PR nightmare? And so, as a web developer, as someone who's really curious, I just took a peek under the hood. So let's do that right now. How do you right click?
Oh, right click is right click online.
Oh, okay. I can code. Don't worry. Okay. So if we just take a peek at their website, you see the typical stuff that we talked about last time. Just some declarations about what type of document this browser is supposed to render, and some other information. A lot of JavaScript, and then as you keep going down, you eventually see a fun little word, and that's called Bootstrap. So let's take a look at what Bootstrap actually is. In this case, this is this is a piece of JavaScript written by an open source community to help simplify a lot of cool interactions that a user can have with static content. And so this is just a small example of how Apple borrows from open source communities to rapidly develop a prototype to try and fix their mistake. And so if you just keep looking around in here, you'll eventually see that Apple is actually using a lot of Bootstrap. Most of their CSS derives from this open source framework that a lot of us developers here use as well. And so let's actually take a look at what it looks like, what this framework looks like on their webpage. Where do we see this Bootstrap framework show up? So Apple makes really cool looking websites, but to get that initial structure, make sure that the header is on the very top, make sure the footer is on the bottom, make sure that everything's aligned properly. Those are all handled by Bootstrap, by special styling on this HTML. So let's just take a look at what that looks like. So if you we read down the bottom in this very structured way, we see this fun word here, Navbar and Navbar top. These are two styling commands, styling directives straight from Bootstrap CSS. What this basically tells us is that we want a navbar, which basically is like a full width, element with some certain height and width, and also navbar top, which says affixes the top and kind of push everything else down. And if you just keep digging through their code, you see that a lot of what they've done is Bootstrap or directly derived from it. And so I started realizing if Apple's doing this for their cool looking websites, I'm sure that we can all get away with it too. So let's see what we can do with Bootstrap and see what else we can find on the internet. So if you take a look at our favorite website at Georgia Tech, Piazza, T-Square, yeah, let's not get into that. I think T-Square was written at a time when it was a very dark time in web dev when I wrote that stuff. So basically, if we just take a look at Piazza, we see these very common design patterns. We see these rounded buttons with this very distinctive color. We see that very distinctive font. We see all these items have a very consistent, very well thought out style. And if you take a look under the hood, you'll actually see that this site as well is completely based on, Bootstrap. You see that it's all from this magical library Bootstrap. So we see this everywhere. Piazza is using Bootstrap. So let's just take a look at what Bootstrap is and what it fits like into this. So Bootstrap, as you say here, is just a web framework for creating, is an HTML and CSS framework for creating websites really quickly. And the big kicker here is that it should be responsive, which means that you can write one web page that will look great on any size of device. So let's just look at this website as an example. We see that you have a navbar here with all these little buttons. You have these buttons on the other end. You have this same type of font and like shaping of buttons, all this stuff, and a nice footer. And so if we simulate what it's like to be on a mobile phone, we'll soon see that everything changes. Everything looks like it belongs on a phone. And if so, you can see that navbar completely collapsed into this little hamburger icon, as they call it. And basically, all the behavior that we wanted in our website is compressed and available to people on smaller devices. And so as we continually scale up the size of the device that we're working on, we get further and further. We can see that it's very responsive. So let's see what Bootstrap offers us. What does it actually give us? Bootstrap gives us something called components, which are just HTML tags that have special styling associated with them in a way that's consistent with what we think about, putting a puzzle together. So, in a typical web page, we'd have things like progress bars. So like when you're uploading a file, you'll see something scrolling up. And the code for that is simply just to put that. Just that. And all you need to do to make this bar move up is have some JavaScript, which will change that value 60%, 70%, etc. And it gives us a lot of fun stuff outside of that. it even gives us some interactivity. So you can toggle this little movement animation. You can add multiple bars together, and this is all very easy. And you can see on their website, they provide that, and they give you the code so you can copy and paste it. So let's see what we can do and create our own website. So we all went to the career fair last week. No. Maybe? Yes? Did we all go to the career fair? Okay. Yeah, get some jobs. Woo. So something you might have realized in a career fair is that, like, in order to look professional and to show your projects, you need a portfolio site. So what we're going to do today is make a portfolio site for one of the greatest humans to ever live on the face of this earth, my man Elon Musk. Let's take a look at his resume and see how we can fit that into our portfolio. So, like, this is kind of a toy article. Someone created a resume for him and said, like, hey, you actually don't need more than one page. But, like, everyone knows his name, so he doesn't even need a resume. So this is by itself a weird concept. All right, let me okay, so you can see this is not responsive. RIP, okay. I'm just going to put his image on one tab, and then we'll start trying to put his accomplishments on our portfolio site. So you can see this very clear structure to his portfolio. We see his name at the top, a nice little description of what he wants to do, some contacts, some nice little logos, some more structure, this 50-50 split, left, right, work experience and skills, and then all the way goes down until, what he did, like just a list of his other accomplishments. So let's see if we can kind of imitate that using Bootstrap and this drag and drop tool. So there's this website called Layoutit. So if you just search layoutit.com, you'll get it. So let's just do that right now. Layoutit.com. And this will give you the exact same thing that I'm working on. So this is meant to be, a very hands-on tutorial. So if you want to jump in and follow along, you can do that. But if you don't want to, we'll end this meeting a little early so you can actually start asking questions, get more insight into how Bootstrap fits into other things that you do. So, so we went to this website, and then they give us these basic components. If you go to Bootstrap's website, you'll see this as well. Here's the button. Here's that navbar I talked about that Apple used. The search, the button, this clickable item here. So what we're going to do now is just clear it and just start from scratch. So if we just look at this, this is just an empty web page. And if we click on preview, we see what it looks like for people on the internet, for people who will load up your site and see it. So if we go back to the resume that we're basing this off of, let's first add a component at the top to put all this information, this header information. Then we'll try and split in the middle and put this information side by side. And that'll be the most of what we do now. So in Bootstrap, there's something called a grid system. That's really important to understand in getting started with this framework. So the basic idea is that you take an entire web page of any size on any mobile device, and you cut up into 12 even portions, because 12 is divisible by a few numbers. It's very divisible, so we can do a lot of work with 12 in terms of divvying up a web page in terms of its columns. So if we just look at this website gives us a few options. So we have this 4-4-4 layout, which means give me 4 portions here, 4 portions here, and 4 portions here. So they just lay out nicely together, take up all the 12 columns, and give you this nice, thirds partition. So we can imagine putting the name in one of these thirds, putting this picture in another, and putting these icons in another. So this is the very top of our portfolio resume page. And so let's go ahead and add a title, just to tell people who this is. And then we'll add a nice little paragraph explaining who this person is. So you notice that this is a prototyping tool. It's a very basic prototyping tool. It's not meant so that we can go and edit this code. It's just meant to give us structure and layout. Layoutit.com. So that's the entire goal. We're not going to be able to edit this text right now. So we have all this. We have Elon Musk eventually, and then we have this little description. And then we see that his image is here. We'll leave that alone for now. Then we have this three little items here. And we can simulate what that looks like in terms of structure by putting something called an unordered list. So you can imagine the email on one of these lines, his phone number, his website's on another, and then his picture will go in the middle. And so we have this basic layout for his header. And so let's see what this looks like in a preview. So you can see that as we click preview, this simulates what it looks like on any other browser. And then if we try and simulate what it looks like on a phone, let's see. We simulate what it looks like on a phone. You see that Bootstrap takes that 4-4-4 layout and just stacks them on top of each other. So this is what responsive design is all about, taking some layout for one device and then changing it as needed for another device, just to make sure that you don't have to rewrite a website for every size screen that you have. So let's just say that this is the behavior we want. We want things to kind of stack on top of each other because you're on a phone. There's not much real estate to move horizontally on a phone, so that's good enough for right now. And then the next step we'll do is divvy this up into 6 portions on the left, 6 portions on the right, and then start listing his experience. So that's really simple here. We just drag this 6, the 6 element, and then we get this left and right division. Does this grid system make sense? Are there any questions? This took me quite a while to really understand, so good questions. Questions are good right now. We all good? Okay, great. So we'll put his work experience here, and then we'll put his skills and competencies here. This is ridiculous. He's like a 10 on all of this. So I don't know who made this. So let's just start putting these little blocks, like his experience, like where he's worked. The first thing would be, let's look at components and see what we can find. Let's see what matches what we think should go there. We can start with a list group. That seems like something interesting. Yeah, so that seems like something we could work with. We can imagine that basically we'll have this list group header item here to be the name of the company worked at, and this little ... thing to be replaced with a paragraph which contains his experience. So let me just see what this looks like on Bootstrap's website, so we can get an idea of what a more complete list group means. So list group. So list group is just a list of items with this nice shape and boxing around it. So we just keep looking through this list group, what we can do with it. We see something similar to what we want. We want something like this, where each item here is simply the name of his company, and each of these paragraphs is those bullet points that we saw. You can see that this is just the code would be identical if we copy and pasted it. So it seems like this will do well for right now. We can fill this in with real detail later. And then the next thing we can do, let's go back to his website. The next thing we want is like some type of list structure to hold all of what he lists as his skills, his achievements, languages, and interests. Okay, let's start with one. Let's start with the skills. Let's first add a small header item, a header tag, just so we can delineate different sections. I guess a title will do. So what we'll do is we'll just place a title here, and then we can change the code later so that we have different size headers, which you can do with something called header tags, which have different values, H1, H2, H3, all the way to H6. And each one of these give you a different size of text. So this is what will be his skills section. Then we'll put just a list of items in here. There you go. And then let's do that again for his achievements and interests. Just another title. Just another list. Let's see. And then we can continue this on later. We can add more detail later, but that gives us a basic structure for what we're looking at. So we have to add a header for his work experience instead of just listing his items. So we can just go ahead and drag this item in here. So this will have work experience, the list of his companies. And then finally, let's see what else. Education, that's important. Let's add that. And then, perhaps say 2 paragraphs, just for fun. 2 paragraphs about the 2 different schools he went to. So this gives us a basic structure for what a resume portfolio site looks like. You can have someone's name here, their bio, their contact information, and then, divvied half and half the work experience, education, and skills and whatnot. So again, this is a very primitive prototyping tool, so we can't actually start adding content and tuning it further. If you're interested in more prototyping tools, things that get you, more customization, more of a feel of what the real life product will be in the end, there are a bunch of different frameworks that we can all list through at the end. So this is just a basic portfolio site. Are we all happy right here? We just got the structure, no content. All right, great. So we have a lot of structure, a lot of soon-to-be content. And what we can do now is export all the Bootstrap HTML code into something we can upload on the internet by ourselves. So what we can do here is just click download, and then we'll download the HTML file that we just generated here. And then it pops up down here in Chrome. We open it up, and that's basically our website. But everything looks kind of out of place. Let's see why. Everything looks just very plain. It doesn't look like the items are in their right place. So let's just take a look at the source and see what happened. Yeah, so this is the problem here. In the website that they generated, they have all of this code, all of the structure that we created, the list here, UL stands for Unordered List. We have this list group, the thing we dropped in before, these paragraphs for the education portion, and this 6-6 division, half and half division that we also decided on. But what they forgot to do is include legitimate references to where the Bootstrap code actually is. So let's see what this looks like. If we go to the developer panel and then open console, you'll see that when we open this file, the browser is telling us that it cannot find any of the other files related to it that is asked for in these link tags. So it cannot find the CSS file or the style tag or any of the jQuery or Bootstrap or JavaScript resources that are required. So what we can do now is try and fix this. And we'll fix that in just a few seconds. But does this all make sense, where we're at, why things are not rendering properly, and what we're doing next? Okay, so we're just going to fix the error. So right now we just have some code, and let's make our first goal putting on the internet, and the second goal fixing these little issues. So as I mentioned before, we're going to be using GitHub to host static content, and I'm just going to walk through from square one how to put this code online. So hopefully, if you're interested, you're following, because I'm just going to do it really quickly. So we'll just pick a username. You'll type in your email, create a password, and then sign up. But in this case, I'll just sign in. This is a account that I created, very bare bones. It's not going to work. 1 second. Let me just get my password. If you guys remember from one of my last talks, I flashed my passwords up on the presentation. It's not happening again, so give me a second. Yeah, so we signed in. And so when you create your first GitHub account, this is what it'll look like. They'll pop in and say, let's get started. Let's start a project. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create something called a repository, which is just, you can think of it like a folder in GitHub system that holds all your code and has some special abilities in terms of knowing how the code has changed over time. So the requirements for creating a repository that GitHub will host are very simple. You take the username that you registered with and then append .github.io to the end. And then any of the files you put in that repository on GitHub will just be served to the internet straight up. So I'll just add github.io. Very simply, this is, I'm the owner of this repository, and the name is my name plus this .github.io. And this just tells GitHub, let's treat this repository specially, and share this code with the world, this website with the world. So just create the repository, and then it's telling us, you can get this repository set up on your own computer. But today, I don't want to do any command line stuff or anything. So we're just going to see how we can get this code, just copy and paste code into their website without any type of, work on your computer. Let's just try and do everything through the browser. So, okay. So the problem right now is that GitHub wants us to upload some code from our computer, but we're not going to do that. But the very simple thing we're going to do is add a README. This is just like a basic file that tells us what the repo is about. We'll commit it, which basically starts this versioning history. This is the very first, registered change with the system. And now we have access to GitHub's, expansive set of features when it comes to uploading files to their website without even, being a coder or being a developer. So we just click on Create New File. The name of our file will be index.html, which is, kind of like the canonical title for what an HTML page would be. Like, this tells every browser and every web server that this is like the root of your website. So index.html is the name of the file we'll use here. And so if we go back to this HTML that we copied from the layout tool, we can just copy all of this stuff and paste it in, and then just commit it again. So you can think of a commit like pressing Control S in Word or something like that. It's very similar. And so now we have created a repository, copied that templating code. And so if you just take this name of the repository and visit it on the internet, you can see miraculously that all the stuff we did is now available to anyone, anywhere. So you can think this is pretty powerful, that what GitHub is enabling for developers. It's really easy to just get your stuff online, showcase your projects, and it's some really fun stuff. So we have all our code, but we still have that same issue. It's not seeing this Bootstrap CSS library, which tells the browser how to exactly style the website. So let's go ahead and fix this issue. So you can see now that just like how we couldn't find that Bootstrap CSS library on Jackson's computer, it also could not find it on my server. On GitHub server, I should say. So if we just visit this website and see what it gives us, let's see. We'll just copy and paste that name. If you just request it straight up, GitHub's like, I don't know what you're wanting. This doesn't make sense. There's a way to fix this on GitHub, but what we'll do now is simply so what we'll do is basically put a link. We'll replace this link with a link to where the Bootstrap code is actually stored. So if we go to getbootstrap.com, we can see exactly where this code is hosted on the internet for everyone to use. So we just go to Get Started, and we see something called Bootstrap Cdn. And what a CDN is basically a very high performance web application that can serve out these static files really, really quickly to millions and billions of people. So Bootstrap is offering this CDN for free. So we can just copy let's just say we copy all of what Bootstrap is offering here. And this gives us full access to all the work that Bootstrap's done, all the work that Apple's used, that Piazza's used, that numerous other sites have used on the internet. And so what we'll do is go back to our GitHub repo, open up this index.html, and then we can see that our problem location is right here. And we're just going to edit this file in the browser. So it's opened up, we have all this cool syntax highlighting. We'll paste that in. And so we have all this fun stuff pasted in, which just tells us, instead of looking on the server for that Bootstrap file, instead look on the CDN, look on the internet for it. And so we put that in. We can, we can look at what GitHub is telling us what exactly changed. As of right now, we removed these 2 lines in red and added these, 8 lines in green. So we'll commit the changes. And then if we visit our website again, everything should work out. Let's see. Everything works out. This is what's on the internet. So we have all this content, all this structure laid out, ready for us to start editing and adding some more fun stuff. So let's make a few more changes. Yeah. So let's start out with this little, generic item from layout it. So you can see that in HTML. So just a basic overview of HTML. It's just a special type of document that tells the browser how to structure and style, websites. So this is just some basic constructs of HTML. You start with an HTML tag, then add this head tag, and then add these special attributes, and then you give it something called the title tag, which tells us what to show up in this little tab heading up here. So we'll just go ahead and change it to what we want. Elon Musk resume. And then we'll just commit those changes. And then instead of this generic Bootstrap 3 from layout it title, we refresh it. We see that we get Elon Musk resume. So it's a very simple way of showing that what we do here is instantly reflected on the internet. So if we go back to the file, let's just add a few things, and then we'll call it good for today. Let's add his name at the top here, and then we'll add a brief summary of what he's done. Wow, that's a lot of stuff. I do rockets. Sure. And then we can imagine just putting some more content here. So we thought this was an ordered list where we put his contact information. So let's just see how we can change this HTML to reflect that. We add a UL tag, an LI, which is a list item tag, which tells us you have this unstructured list. Here's an item of that list. We'll write his email, which is probably not this. We'll close the tag, which tells us this is the end of the content for this list item. We'll add his resume. We'll add his phone number. Something crazy. And then say, what else do we have? What else do we have in his website? In his resume. Okay, sure. So his location. You can see that GitHub is actually pretty smart here. Just like, it's telling us that we didn't close off this li tag, which means that these tags are not effective in terms of structuring this website. So I closed it. That's good to go. We'll commit this file and see what we've done so far. See, we refresh it. Okay, we have a bug. Let's find out. Okay, there you go. So if we just go to that special file within the repo, then all our changes are actually there. And then if we say view this on a mobile phone, you can see that everything stacks on top of each other really nice. And then so you can imagine that from here on out we can start delving deeper into what Bootstrap is, and then adding more content as to what his education is, what his experience is, so on and so forth. So when you want to develop your own site or develop your own portfolio or prototype your own apps, get something out, in a hackathon, this is a really great tool to use. It's only been like 20 minutes, and we've been able to explain how to get started with hands-on web development without really doing much code. We just need to know how to we need to have a good eye for design and then know where to substitute our content for this generic content given to us by this prototyping website. And it's really, really simple and straightforward. Okay, so that's an overview of this talk. Are there any questions? Any requests for things we should do from here on out? We can dive deeper, make some really cool looking stuff if you're interested. Okay, so in the next few minutes, I'll just list out a few really cool resources that you guys might want to take note of if you want to enhance this experience of doing code really quickly. So we explored bootstrap.com, getbootstrap.com. That's just a way for you to get started with this code. It's really simple. We just copied and pasted this stuff into the generic HTML document, and then it tells you a lot of other instructions that we don't need to know. And you can just jump into components. If you like how you have these little buttons or these different size buttons, you just copy this and then paste it in, save it, and you're done. You have this stuff on your site. And if you want to learn more about that that grid system that we talked about, this is the best resource to look into that. So I'm not sure if they talk about this. Let me find out. Nope, they don't talk about it here. Yeah, so if you look in the CSS tag, they actually walk us step by step into what you need to do to get your site started. And then they talk a lot about the grid system. So if you just read through this a few times, you'll have a really good understanding of how the grid system works. As we talked about before, we have this website vertically divvied up into 12 portions. And then remember how we use this 444 layout and this 66 layout. And this just gives you all the code you need to write just to get that same code that you saw on top. And I'll just go into one more small detail. A really cool thing about Bootstrap is that it allows you to tailor the structure of your site for the size of the device. So just how we saw that Bootstrap automatically changed our portfolio site from something on a desktop to something on a mobile phone by kind of stacking everything on top of each other, you can actually be really explicit about what you want to happen. So say on a mobile phone, you want that header to actually stay there completely, occupy all 12 columns and have the name on one side and have those links on another. That would look really bad. Things would end up getting really funky, but you could do that. You would just have to use some different attributes. You'd have to use this extra small CSS class to basically tell your browser to render it in a different way. And this goes into a lot of detail about how this works, and it's a really cool thing to get started with. Another really fun site is Material Bootstrap. Oh, spelled that wrong. Okay, Material Bootstrap. And if we go to, there's a few different things here, but let's just see what this looks like. If you're a fan of how Google creates their websites, how they lay out their content, how they design user interactions, Material Bootstrap takes those same the same code that we wrote for the we didn't write anything actually. The same code that we designed for the portfolio and actually gives us this Google-esque look to it. So you don't really need to change anything. You just need to add a different link to where you can find this particular library's CSS code. And you can see that everything here looks really cool. Looks just like what Google would do, and it's free for you guys to check out and use. Actually, it's free to a point. If you want to do anything like really cool with this, you have to pay them. So that's why I don't use it. But there are many other implementations of Google's material design for Bootstrap. And you can see this is actually a really cool library, material design based on Google Material Design. And so you use the same. Let's see. Let me see if there's something common I can show. use the same CSS classes on each of these HTML tags to render content in Bootstrap, but use it in a way that looks different with Material Bootstrap. And then you have this other library, and it's like an endless list of things. So that's like an overview of Bootstrap pretty much in its entirety, like what you can do, what it looks like. There's other frameworks around. One of the easiest ones to use is called Ionic Framework. It's like it takes this HTML, CSS that we worked on, and so basically Ionic is its own library with its own CSS classes, its own set of rules, its own behaviors. But if you learn it in the same depth that you can learn Bootstrap, you can still do really cool stuff. And one of the really cool things that Ionic can do, in addition to making websites like Bootstrap, is that it allows you to make mobile apps that are actually just shells for a website, for a responsive website. So you can see, let's see an example here. So this is what say a scrolling list would look like on a phone, and the code behind that is simply HTML. It's just a markup with the same things that we've seen before, these tags and all this content and stuff like that. But what Ionic does is it has its own set of rules and stylings, and it allows you to make mobile apps for free, which is really cool. And you don't need to learn anything more than HTML, CSS if you want to do, if you don't really want to touch device-specific code like location services or anything. Other frameworks include React Native, which is something that I'm sure we'll get into. Does React have its own CSS libraries?
So it is based on the CamelScript CSS.
Okay.
Basically for almost everything, except for maybe the WebKit crap.
Okay.
If there's a CSS version of it, then you can do the same thing. Just in you cast CSS as variables rather than just magically applying to elements.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know anything about this, but yeah, you can take note of this. I'm sure we'll get into it. Sounds fun. I might look into it. So we have Bootstrap, Ionic Framework. Are there any other really good CSS frameworks, easy to use?
Ionic and React Native are CSS.
Well, Ionic has its own, yeah.
There's a lot of this, styling frameworks that are designed specifically for Angular or React that will come with their own components.
Oh yeah, I forgot about those.
And there's a really old one that you don't want to use. I can't really call it Yahoo. YUI is YUI. Don't use YUI. So this was before Bootstrap. This is what everyone used. If you click on that, it's going to say, don't use it.
That's really funny. Oh, this is pretty interesting. Okay, let's follow the suggestion and not look at that.
I remember when all websites looked like that.
Yeah. So if you're a big fan of Google's approach to making making their products look really nice, Materialize Css is a very popular implementation of what's called the material design specification. And this is just it's pretty different from Bootstrap, but it gives you a lot of access to the stuff that we're doing. It has skeleton. Okay, yeah. So it has the same grid system, but pretty much everything after that is pretty different. So if you look at what components they have, look at what we've used already. Actually, we haven't really touched a lot of the components, but you can see if you want these let's see. Oh yeah, this looks familiar. This could be like a list of experiences. You could do the same thing in Materialize with different CSS classes. You have this Navbar that we saw in Bootstrap and all sorts of other fun. And then another really cool thing is Specification CSS. Apparently it's like really small, right? It's a pretty small, it's like a very compact framework. They did a lot with a very small amount of code. And so it's similar to Bootstrap in that it has a grid system, but it has a different feel to it. It has a different set of fonts, a different set of colors and things like that. And yeah, I think those are the main CSS frameworks that we can go into. Yeah, so the goal for this talk was to be very hands-on, get something real online really quickly. And then if you guys have questions about, if you all have questions about, customizing this, making it look really professional, you're welcome to stay over. Our meetings were originally planned from 6 to 8, and now what we're trying to do is make them like 45-minute talks, which I think I accomplished. No, I didn't time it. Okay, whatever. Yeah, so this is a relatively brief talk compared to what happened last semester. You guys are welcome to stay, ask any questions. The offices will be here for quite a while, and we can help you customize the work we've done so far, start on your own projects. So thank you very much for coming.